Dr. Rob Zatechka, you know what I've learned in the last couple days?
I like beer.
Well, you've always liked beer. And if we ever get our basement done and get the studio back up and running, we've got a beer fridge just for the studio.
It's going to be epic.
What I've learned is you can't keep anybody happy.
No.
You were in Lincoln on Friday night. You know where I'm going with this, right?
Thursday night and Friday night.
But Friday night, Nebraska's playing Arizona State.
Correct.
Your niece plays volleyball for Arizona State.
Correct.
You and your wife show up wearing Arizona State gear.
Yes.
And the Twitter world goes crazy. You know, it's just wrong that you're wearing the opponent's gear in a Husker venue playing the Huskers.
Every coach I've ever played for has always said the name on the back of the jersey is more important than the name on the front.
I would agree with you.
Family before team.
I mean, if your life is that, I mean, how are you viewing life that if you're looking at Dr. Rob, who's the nicest guy in the world, who's
sometimes
the biggest Nebraska, I've never known you to be mean. I don't want to see mean Rob. I don't know what mean Rob looks like because we were talking about this the other day. You and I have actually been together over 20 years now.
Yeah, easy.
So if you're new to the podcast, Rob and I started broadcasting together. Well, if you want to start the Todd and Tyler days, that was back in the late 90s.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking a quarter century.
Yeah,
here.
So Rob and I have been together a long time, and I've never seen Rob be mean. I've seen him be condescending in a joking way, but I've never seen him just mad. And you're one of the biggest Nebraska fans I know. You're from Lincoln. You went to Lincoln East. You played at Nebraska. But every time you either wear Michigan State gear, Florida State gear, or now Arizona State gear, people just lose their shit.
What's funny is I wear Augustana gear all the time.
Yeah, but that's not a Division I school, so they don't care.
Now they played a Division I school this weekend.
Division I AA, FCS.
Yeah, I know, but they're going to end up in FBS at some point.
Do you think? Well, that's the interesting part.
Yeah.
Before we dive into the UNI Nebraska game, you brought up something because this came up on my radio show earlier in the week. The Pac-12 is starting to have a resurgence. You've got Colorado State, Boise State, San Diego State, and I forget who the other one's going to go. But everybody's like, well, who are the next two? Because you need two more to be legit. Everybody's like North Dakota State and South Dakota State. And I'm like, well,
I don't know if it's a good fit for him. Well, here's the other thing. What if the Big 12 is willing to take on those two schools? Because wrestling, they have D1 wrestling that wrestles for the Big 12. So, I mean, Big 12 wrestling includes the Dakota schools, Northern Iowa, Air Force Academy, Wyoming. That's all Big 12 wrestling. So you've already got some ties to the Big 12. It's not football ties.
See,
but it's conference ties.
I think what South Dakota State and North Dakota State have to weigh is this. If you need money, which they don't, they have. I mean, you were just in Brookings.
Beautiful facilities, great campus.
Or do you sacrifice
well-funded?
Do you sacrifice championships? Because North Dakota State and South Dakota State are going to compete every single year at FCS. Going to FBS, no way. No way.
I think there's sort of a notion in football right now where there's this idea where if you're these mid-major to major schools, and when I say that, I'm even dropping down to maybe like that upper tier of Division II, where it's sort of this grow or die mentality. And I say mentality, it might be a reality. I don't know if it's a reality really yet, but the idea behind it is you're going to need to grow or die. And I mean, I even see it when I look at Augustana where, and I might be wrong on some of the details here. I think they called it their 2030 plan, which is by 2030, outside of hockey, which Augustana had their inaugural hockey season last year, came in as a true Division I hockey team. So they play D1 hockey. They're going to move the other sports in the program up to FCS.
See, there'll be Division I in all the other sports, FCS and football, and that makes sense because you can still make the NCAA basketball tournament. You can still compete for conference titles, make the NCAA tournaments in other sports. Football is a different animal. If you're going to have a $23 million salary cap to start with, they're not going to be able to do that. They're just not. Hell, some Big 12 schools may not be able to meet that $23 million
cap. That's a reality that, I mean, all of these schools are going to have to face. But that's also why, I mean, when you're looking at the total landscape of college football, one of the conversations we've had repeatedly is about having sort of a college football championship, like a college football playoff division. So you've got the college football playoff division, then D1, and that's going to be everything from Texas San Antonio up to K-State and Iowa State's type level schools.
Now, Iowa State and K-State will say, no, they're going to be in that upper echelon.
They're going to want to be. I mean, you and I did a breakdown on this year and a half ago, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really look at it, I mean, all of a sudden you start adding all of these schools in and you realize, God, there's a lot of true Division I FBS schools. Who all is going to be in the mix? I mean, at some point, there's going to be some haves and have-nots in that mix. And there's going to be a lot of schools that are able to make some of these monetary payouts. And again, when you mention that $23 million, you're talking about the House settlement,
which now has been pushed back for resettlement.
It is, but the thing is, though, that's going to be hanging over everybody's heads for a while here. There's some levels that schools are going to have to meet financially to be able to sustain at that college football playoff level. Can an Iowa State, Kansas, Colorado State, are those schools going to be able to do that or not?
And by the way, Colorado State is the other. Or did I mention them?
You mentioned them.
I mentioned
the
them.
Pac-12, or the new Pac-12, or the Pac whatever it ends up being, Pac-9.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to be the SEC schools and the Big Ten schools that are going to have the most money because they're getting the most media rights money. So that's always interesting to me. The money trail. South Dakota State, North Dakota State, they have great support. They have great funding from their alumni. I would say they're perfect right where they are at for football, and they compete in those other sports. They're going to the NCAA tournament in basketball, so they get some of that other D1 money by making the tournament.
But if you did split off and had a college football playoff division and then a rest of the D1 schools division, a South Dakota State, North Dakota, Northern Iowa, I think would survive within that, financially could survive within that division. So
I was perusing social media after the game yesterday, and Mitch Sherman, who's been on this podcast, of course, he writes for The Athletic, and he was flabbergasted at the reaction on the radio when he was coming home, because he said the calls delved into where's the fullback, and then it eventually made to the 1990s, which a lot of Nebraska shows do. So I went ahead and broke out our 4th and 1 is why God created fullbacks t-shirt.
It's a great t-shirt.
It is a very good t-shirt. I was wearing it at the breakfast table today, and my wife goes, I have no idea what that means. She goes, I literally do not know what this shirt means. I said, you don't have to, sweetheart.
Spoken like an Iowa State grad.
See, and she is an Iowa State grad. Spoken like an Iowa State marching band member.
A lot of the marching band folks I know, they're pretty astute with the football knowledge.
They're band geeks. All they cared about was their little artsy-fartsy band world.
Why do you hate the Iowa State marching band?
I hate all marching bands except the Texas A&M Fighting Aggie band.
I was in the marching band.
You were not.
In high school.
You were not.
I marched.
You did not.
Not during any games because I was playing in them all. But
what'd you play, the tuba?
Yeah, no shit. What do you think I played?
Oh, my God. You played the tuba? You have a 6'5" giant, and you add a tuba on top of that. You were like 10 feet fucking tall out there.
What do you... Technically, what you're thinking of is the sousaphone. That's not a tuba.
Oh, so you had okay. So
yeah, the tuba is what the sousaphone players play during sit-down concerts.
But I think
if you're marching, it's the sousaphone, which is the big tall guy.
So did you have the big tall guy?
Yeah.
Okay. So you had the thing wrapped around your shoulder?
Yeah.
And it was like white?
Yeah.
Or gold?
I think ours actually were brass.
I'm just imagining you in a marching band outfit. I can't believe Lincoln East had one that fits you.
Well, that hurts my feelings.
No, well, because you're 6'5". You're a giant.
They might have had a special order that one for me now that I think about it.
Owen, are you surprised at this? I am. I mean, even Owen's just like, yeah. I mean, I've known you for 30 years I've known you.
You didn't think I was a Renaissance man.
I had no idea.
At one point in time, now, I wasn't great. But at one point in time, I could play the trumpet, the tuba, which basically the tuba and sousaphone are gigantic trumpets,
yes.
What they are. But I could play the trumpet, the tuba / sousaphone, and I was okay and in a pinch could fill in with the trombone. Wasn't great, but I was okay.
Now, my wife was a trombone player. She was an all-state trombone player.
There you go. Talent.
I have zero musical talent. I played the saxophone in like 5th grade.
I tried hard, I will say.
I didn't try, and I was one of those that sat at band concerts and acted like I was playing, but I didn't play. I didn't play a note. No, did not play a note. My wife got all the musical talent in the family, and then Owen came along.
That's outstanding.
Yeah, Owen's got musical talent.
He got all of yours.
Yeah.
He just sucked it right out.
He did. It was like all my DNA just
went to him.
Yes.
We're
whatever there was left. You were before we get into the game, we do want to remind people, if you're watching, found this podcast on Husker Max, thanks so much for finding it. Of course, Husker Max has the most up-to-date Nebraska website out there for the latest news, commentary, message boards. Go to huskermax.com. Lots of good stuff out there. I'm wearing my G-Defies today, and Owen's got his G-Defies on today.
I did wear mine all weekend, traipsing everywhere from Sioux Falls up to Brookings.
Yeah, but you drove home. You wanted to be comfortable in the.
I went with the flats.
The flats.
Yeah.
But if your feet hurt, it's not probably anything you're doing. It's probably your damn shoes that you're wearing, and that's why you need to get yourself a pair of G-Defies. I was so excited when I was reading the YouTube comments this week, and some guy got on there and said, you know what? He's had a pair of G-Defies for a while. Says the best pair of shoes he's ever had.
Perfect.
And could not be more satisfied. If you want a pair of G-Defies, go to gravitydefier.com. That's gravitydefier.com. There's such a wide selection of shoes on the website. I mean, we're talking work boots, we're talking sandals, we're talking walking shoes, we're talking running shoes. And you can pick that variety out. You get a 60-day guaranteed money back. Wear them for 60 days.
You can return
them. And
if you don't like them, they'll take them back and give you your money back.
And Dr. Rob and I are here to save you a little bit of money. If you use the code DocTalk20 at checkout, you're going to get $20 off an order of $100 or more. And I promise you're going to be satisfied with them, because now it takes a while. They even tell you to ease into it a little bit. I mean, first, when you take them out of the box, walk for about an hour. Don't just say, these are my everyday shoes. You kind of got to get used to them. But once you get used to them, you're going to be very, very satisfied. So save yourself $20. Use the promo code DocTalk20 at checkout on orders of $100 or more and start wearing your G-Defies. Go to gravitydefier.com. Our buddy Scott Strunk over at Husker Hounds is probably gearing up for this Friday night game, because the more Nebraska wins, the busier Husker Hounds gets. He's like, the last 10 years have been brutal on the retail business.
I went there. Well, I mean, we talked about this after the Colorado game. I went there Saturday morning before a Husker night game. Questionable decision on my part. The place was packed. Got what I wanted. Got a couple of really nice T-shirts for the game. It was, I shopped there. If
there's one thing or one place that's redder than Memorial Stadium, it's Husker Hounds.
It is. He has everything.
And so you walk in, it's just like this sea of red. Go check out the best selection. You're heading into fall, so you want to start warming up, wearing some heavier keep you a little warmer. Got the quarter zips, got the sweatshirts, got the hoodies. Husker Hounds, 2 locations in the Omaha area, and of course online at huskerhounds.com. Talked to our buddy Connor Orr just 2 days ago. Big things happening over at the Orr Law Group. I'm going to give a little away. Might be growing a little bit, and
nice.
You're growing because people listen to this podcast, and people are saying, "Hey, I need a lawyer." So if you need a litigator, somebody who does estate planning, Connor Orr is the lawyer you need to go to. He's been a longtime supporter of the podcast. Go to orrlawgrp.com. That's Orrlaw, ORR, lawgrp.com, and connect with Connor for all your legal needs. All right, so Nebraska wins pretty easily against Northern Iowa when you look at the score, 34-3. You gave on your report card an incomplete.
Dude, people really question that one.
I know, because even Owen walked in and he's like, incomplete?
I don't get it.
I go, well, Rob and I were talking today, and he goes, I've gone over the game a couple times, and I think I want to give it an incomplete. And I said,
and I don't necessarily mean that in a negative sense. And I want people to understand that.
But it was one of those games, some people are making excuses saying, well, you're coming off the emotional high of Colorado. You look at the score and you're like, well, that was a piece of cake. It wasn't a piece of cake.
No.
And I told you about Mark Farley. Mark Farley is a friend of mine. He does my radio show every Thursday. He's a tremendous dude. And they were prepared. I mean, Northern Iowa was prepared. Nebraska knocked Nebraska off its game a little bit.
Yeah, I'd give you that.
So why the incomplete? They had some tackling problems. So couldn't finish in the red zone.
Yeah. Here's the thing: is that there's so many variables that come into an evaluation like this, and the biggest thing is that how even a matchup is this? I mean, it's easy if you look at two teams and if they're on paper fairly evenly matched and you have a blowout win. So I'm trying to think of a good game from Nebraska history, and the one I'm going to settle on, let's say Colorado, Nebraska, 1992, Halloween night. This is the one where Nebraska went off on a 52-7 just boat races Colorado in Lincoln. Destroys them, okay? On paper, that Colorado team was a who's who, which all of those Colorado teams were a who's who of the next spring's NFL draft. Every Colorado team from that era was. If you go out and blow a team like that out, that's telling. That is an easy evaluation. Here's a very good Colorado team, whole slew of NFL guys up and down the entire roster. If you beat them, if you blow them out like that, that's an A+ easy. It is so easy to grade a game like that. The other thing that's kind of easy too is if you go against an evenly matched opponent like that again. You go against Colorado, let's say Colorado 1993. It's essentially the same two teams. We won that game, I think it was 21-7. Not exactly a blowout, but it's two fairly evenly matched teams. Colorado's at home. That was in Boulder. But again, you can objectively look at Nebraska and say, here's a pretty good Nebraska team. Here's a pretty good Colorado team. Very evenly matched. Nebraska won by 2 scores. It's an easy game to grade. You can say, hey, Nebraska gets an A here, an A here, and an A here. Why wasn't as big of a blowout as it was last year? Well, they got a B here and a C here. It's easy to grade games between two opponents that are objectively matched. Here's what's difficult, is if you get I'm going to give you a third example. How about Nebraska versus North Dakota 2 years ago?
You brought this up on Twitter.
I did. And the comparison is with that particular game. Again, this is an easy game to grade. That game was 7-7, I believe, into the early fourth quarter. North Dakota has Nebraska backed up in its own end zone, north end zone, coming out. It's like 3rd and whatever. And if North Dakota stops them, Nebraska's punting out of the back of their own end zone. North Dakota's got the ball in good field position with a chance to take the lead in the fourth quarter. Casey Thompson hits Trey on basically a wing and a prayer Hail Mary, which basically throwing that deep was on like the 31-yard line. It saved Nebraska's game. I mean, Nebraska, I think they did, in fact, manage to score on that drive, go up 14-7, and Nebraska wins the game. But you've got an FCS opponent, and again, it's one of those Missouri Valley teams that's a very good program in North Dakota. But that's a game where you look at it. We got an FCS team coming to Lincoln, home game for Nebraska, and we needed some late game heroics to pull it out. That's an easy game to grade. That's a C+ tops. Probably more like a C- or a D+. You got an FCS opponent, well coached, well recruited, well developed FCS team, but it's still an FCS team, and you had to pull out, like I said, this Hail Mary out of your own end zone just to get a first down to win the game. That's an easy grade. If you have a big win over a very good FCS opponent like Northern Iowa, all of a sudden it gets kind of hard to grade that. And the reason is because you blew out a team that you should blow out, but at the same time, you know it's a good team. And there's things Northern Iowa did that I'm looking at going like, man, that's a little concerning to me. Here's some things I'm worried about. And so it's one of those, well, do you downgrade them? But on the flip side, Nebraska was never in doubt. The game was never in doubt. Nebraska, like I said, it's these contrasts that I'm not sure how to grade it out, where Nebraska scored on 5 of its first 6 possessions. Okay, well, you say that and you're like, okay, yeah, that's great. That's really good. Well, they weren't all touchdowns. They got stopped, had to settle for field goals. Their defense shut down. I'm going to rephrase this. Nebraska's defense kept Northern Iowa out of the end zone. Yeah, they did. They didn't shut them down completely. Yardage looked great. Points looked great. But Northern Iowa had the ball for 2/3 of the game.
They had a 17-minute time of possession advantage.
Yeah, it was almost a 40 to 20-minute time of advantage in that game. Those are the kind of numbers that if Coach Osborne was coaching and looking at those numbers, he'd be dropping dadgummits. That's the kind of thing that would stress him out, is seeing that kind of time of possession differential. But these are the things that make it. It's one of those, well, do you downgrade them? Or should you downgrade them when they still blew them out? Because it's like I said, Farley's been at Northern Iowa, 25 years?
He's been there a while. He was at Kansas he played at Northern Iowa, was an assistant at Northern Iowa, went to Kansas with Terry Allen, and then went back and took the Northern Iowa job. I'm trying to think what year that was, but you're coming up on that
23,
25,
24, 25. It's right in that ballpark. Winningest coach, I think he's the current winningest coach in FCS football. The guy's got a hell of a track record, great coach. That was a well-prepared team. So I don't necessarily want to look at Northern Iowa and play down their ability to play football. They're a good football team, but you've got all of these counterbalancing factors that make it really difficult to grade.
Let me try to put this in layman's terms. It was a blowout, but it was still fun to watch both teams, right? It was a competitive game. Yeah.
And that's the thing that line between FCS and FBS it's narrowing. I mean, we talked a little bit about Augustana. They bumped up. They played FCS, defending national champs. They lost 24-3. They had their chances throughout the game. They managed to force a couple of, I think, 2 or 3 turnovers during the course of the game. Just not able to punch it into the end zone for an actual touchdown. But they moved the ball. They controlled the clock. They did some very good things that you're watching this game and you're thinking, man, this is a D2 football team that's all of a sudden is really competitive against arguably the best team in FCS football. These lines are blurring and these divisions the gaps are closing between divisions here. And it makes, again, It makes it interesting. It makes it fun to see these interdivisional matchups because they're getting very, very competitive. But again, the bottom line here, it makes it really hard to look at a game like this and say, yeah, Nebraska gets a B+ overall versus a C+. The offense gets this versus that. I mean, do you downgrade the offense for not punching it into the end zone, but they still scored on 5 of their first 6 possessions? It's like I said, it's not an easy grade to hand out. And that's why I'm looking at this going, and then the second half hits, and they start subbing guys in, and they're putting in the second team guys, and they're getting some of these younger guys a bunch of playing time, which again I think is key. I think that's huge. Third game in a row, we've seen the backups getting extensive playing time in a football game, and I think that's the thing. That's one of those things that's bugged me the last decade is seeing the starters into the final
because you weren't able to build depth.
Exactly. And this is all of a sudden, I'm sitting here going, man, we're going to have a couple injuries later in the year, and we're going to put some guys into games in key positions at key times during the game, and they're going to perform because they've been out there and have gotten real playing time in games this year already.
Do you buy the thing where people are saying they're coming off an emotional win?
It plays into stuff. I mean, but it's one of those, how big a difference did that make here? Because again, I'm looking at Northern Iowa and going, how big of a step down are they from Colorado?
That's fair.
I mean, Colorado played
Colorado State yesterday.
Yeah,
looked good.
But a week before the Nebraska game, they were playing a conference rival of Northern Iowa. They played North Dakota State a couple of weeks ago, and that was a hell of a competitive game. The Missouri Valley teams can compete with the Colorado.
Well, and Mark Farley's told me that he considers the Missouri Valley the SEC of FCS, and the Big Sky's the Big Ten, and it kind of works out that way. I mean, those are the two power conferences. It really does,
and I watch a lot of. All of a sudden, when you have family members, when you've got a kid, when you've got a nephew playing FCS D2 football, you watch a lot of FCS football. You watch a lot of D2 football. I watch a lot of NAIA games. The quality is going up, but yeah, the Missouri Valley it's a hell of a league.
What's the most concerning thing to you, that Nebraska gave up 139 yards rushing, or that Northern Iowa had the ball 38 minutes and 7 seconds?
The time of possession thing irks me because that's something that, if there's one statistic that tends to push teams into the win column, time of possession. If you can control the clock, if you can own the ball, if you can keep the ball out of the opponent's hands, it makes a massive difference in terms of outcomes. That one's a little bit worrisome for me. Now, Nebraska was able to score and score quick enough. It wasn't a huge factor in this game.
Yeah, the fact that they were able to put up 34 points and just having the ball 21 minutes speaks to what they can do.
It's kind of impressive. The thing that was a little worrisome is that when you'd see that offense stall a little bit, they'd settle for a field goal. Alvano looked good. He actually looked like he was in a rhythm. So that's a nice thing. It was nice seeing him get out there and get a couple of kicks there. But that's one of those things where I know at one point in the game, I think it was when Nebraska was up 27-3. I'm sitting there looking at it just going, okay, they really should be up 35-3 at this point, and that last touchdown run should have pushed them to 42. Now, it just looks better, but the reality is that they weren't able to convert on a couple of those, and that's something against a better defense, against a Big Ten defense that has maybe just a pinch better athletes than what Coach Farley has at Northern Iowa. is that going to come back to haunt Nebraska at some point?
Carter Nelson had a hell of a game. That the freshman got his first touchdown as a Nebraska Cornhusker, just his third 11-on-11 game. They kept saying that on the network.
That is kind of impressive.
4 targets, 4 catches, 48 yards, yards after catch 29. He had a long of 24 and 1 touchdown. But
he's going to be a problem for people.
You think?
A little bit.
And hell, him and Fedoni, I mean, you're going to rival any tight end core in the country with those two.
It is. And I mean, it's one of those things where I keep waiting for that offense to really cut loose because I want to see those guys going vertical because they're going to be matchup disasters for defenses.
Dylan Raiola, just another spectacular game, 17 of 23. He did have a pick.
Kind of sketched.
Yeah.
Did you watch?
Yeah, I thought it was kind of sketched too.
You saw the pick. You saw the replay of it. Rule challenged the replay even and still got it. God, I can't believe I'm saying this. He got overruled.
But
pun was completely unintended there. It's hard for me to put that one on Raiola. That's one of those. He put the ball where it needed to be for Jalen to catch it. I thought the defender just made a hell of a play, essentially yanking it out of Jalen's hands. I thought it was a great pass. I thought Raiola put it where it exactly needed to be. I thought Lloyd did a great job on the play. It just, that's one of those I'm looking at going, okay, you know what? The other guy's getting a paycheck too, so he's going to make some plays. And that's one of those things. I don't put that one on Raiola. So it's one of the, I don't count that one against him, as I guess what I'm saying.
If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do so. Just hit the subscribe button, and that way when we have new content that comes out, you're going to be alerted. You can actually set yourself to get an alert to when content comes out, because the doc's diagnosis, depending on when you're watching this podcast or listening to it, is going to be one of the Dylan Raiola TD passes to Isaiah Nayor, the second touchdown of the game. He did a beautiful job reading the defense. There was a blitz coming.
That was an interesting blitz. We talk about that during the
diagnosis.
The diagnosis.
Brought to you by Centris Federal Credit Union, by the way.
But it was a great blitz call by Northern Iowa. It was kind of an interesting, I'll say there was an interesting pass protection call with Nebraska's pass protection. It worked out, though.
So up next for Nebraska is going to be a Friday night showdown. Let's talk about that real quick, because you lose a day of preparation and you play on a Friday night. We heard Matt Rule last week say he doesn't really like night games. He likes kegs, eggs, and football.
I'm still one of those. That's the greatest line ever.
I mean, it's just everything he says is just spot on point. I'm with him. I love 11 o'clock games. Those are my favorite.
Morning games.
But talk about the short week and then the night game as well.
The Friday ones. The only Friday games we ever played, we played Oklahoma Friday after Thanksgiving every year.
Yeah.
That one never really bugged me too much because it was Oklahoma, so you're going to be hyped for that one. In general, I was kind of one of these guys that I liked. I wanted, it was sort of an all or nothing. I want it to be Saturday or Thursday. And the Thursday night games were kind of fun because even with the NFL, we played in a couple of the Thursday night ESPN games. Always liked those. You're the one game everybody's watching. It was easy to get up for those games, even with that short week of practice. The Friday ones, it's just, I don't know, it always felt like that. You would lose a little bit of rhythm. But again, it's Oklahoma, so you kind of found that groove there because of that. But Saturday's the best. Thursday night's great. I wasn't ever a huge fan of that 1 day shorter week.
But this game's going to be interesting because you have 2 top 25 teams now.
Who'd have thunk, by the way?
No kidding. People were not expecting big things out of Illinois. Illinois 3-0. Its best start since 2011. They're now into the top 25. First time they've been ranked since 2022. Last time they were ranked before 2022 was 2011. Brett Bielema has a record above 500 and they beat Central Michigan yesterday 30-9. I'm telling you, I like the quarterback they have. Luke Altmaier was 19 of 29 yesterday, 242 yards. That's a new season. That's a record for him. So that's his highest passing totals he's had. He had 2 touchdowns. And Pat Bryant's his favorite receiver. He hit him 7 times for 102 yards. I mean, and they run a lot of motion, and they get you moving in different directions. This has the potential to be a pretty darn good game.
So, hot take here.
Okay. Hot take, Rob.
Hot take. I think Nebraska wins this one easy.
Easy.
I don't call that much. I'm probably jinxing the shit out of them. Troy Dannon's never going to let UNI into the stadium again. I think Nebraska wins this one. I'm not saying a blowout, but I don't think it's in doubt.
What makes you feel that? Just your gut, or
because I went and looked back, and maybe again it's too much of the analytics here on this. That I went back and I looked at the breakdown of the Central Michigan game that they played yesterday. If you look at that game on paper, that is about as even a matchup as I have ever seen. I think first downs were 19-20 between the two teams. I think off the top of my head, I think Illinois did have 70 more passing yards than Central Michigan.
So they had 242 yards passing, 167 for Central Michigan, who's quarterbacked by Joe Labus, who's a former Iowa quarterback who went to Central Michigan.
Hold on. I'm going to crack open another Talking Waters beer here.
Yeah, and you say this is nothing against our fellow brewers out there, but Rob's not a big Crowler fan. He says of all the beer, it just doesn't taste the same in a Crowler.
So guess what I'm going to do? So Crowlers, you have to drink them fresh. Oh, Owen needs more beer. So this is their.
He's chasing the stuff with the Busch Light, by the way.
Mint Aloha smoothie sour. So we're crushing a couple sours here, which is Traz's favorite beer. So my buddy Mark Weber, Mark's son Eli, was a 4-time all-conference safety for Augustana. Sorry about the pour there. That is going to be foamy as heck. So Mark's actually supplied some Talking Waters to us a few times over the last couple of years. So
good-looking labels, though.
It is cool. And it's great beer, but because it's in a Crowler, you got to drink them fresh, so we're going to kill all of them today.
That means you're going to be hanging around here till like 9 o'clock.
Well, you're going to help me, aren't you?
No, I'm not drinking beer yet.
Weak effort.
I am.
Owen's helping.
I'm close to my goal. I'm 3 pounds away from my goal.
Okay.
Let me hit my goal.
All right, fine. Owen's going to help me. So.
If I hit my goal this week, which I don't think I will, but who knows, I'd gone from 246 down to 200. I got 3 pounds to go to get to 200.
That's impressive, actually.
So I'm trying to stay on the straight and narrow, and that beer would not help me. I'm telling you,
probably not. But anyway, this has a passion fruit, guava, orange, coconut, and sea salt. So I've not had this one yet, but we're going to give this a try. This is going to be outstanding. Anyway, so looking at the stats, Illinois, Central Michigan. Illinois had, I think it was roughly 70 yards more passing. Central Michigan had, I think it was like 5 yards more rushing. Time of possession was almost equal. I think there was a minute and a half difference.
Yep.
We already mentioned first downs. Turnovers, the thing that I think really was maybe a little bit of a game changer here. Central Michigan had 2 turnovers. Illinois had none. So basically, the two teams on the field were evenly matched. Both of them moved the ball. Central Michigan moved the ball against Illinois.
And Nebraska will move the ball against Illinois.
They just didn't punch it in. Central Michigan just wasn't able to get it into the end zone in that game, and that was the difference.
Yeah, they were 3 of 3 in the red zone, but all 3 scores were field goals. They got 0 touchdowns out of that.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I look at this and I still question Illinois a little bit. Now, I was actually kind of riding high on Illinois after the KU game. And now we're sitting here looking at KU going, I don't know how good they are this year.
Well, I think they're good. It's just, you're not going to take anybody by surprise anymore. I think a lot of people look past Kansas and Lance Leipold's first couple of years. Then they come in with the high expectations.
They shouldn't have looked past him after year one.
I'm with you. We took some heat on Twitter like, oh, who was talking about Lance Leipold? And I'm like, he's still a great coach.
No, and I do think he is a good coach, but it's always, hindsight's always 20/20 because, and again, here's the other thing too. We're 3 games in.
Yes.
It's a 12-game regular season. There's a lot of football left to be played. There was a lot of questions about Rule at the time Nebraska hired him because at the time, KU's hiring Leipold. Or was that the year before, actually? This is
year before.
It was year before, because this is year 3 for Leipold at Kansas. But still, at the same time, people are like, God, if we could have gotten somebody like Leipold, that would be great. I heard that chatter back when Trev fired Scott and we brought in Rule. The other name that came up, at Wisconsin, Cincy.
Luke Fickell.
Thank you. So Fickell was the other name that got tossed around a lot. Like, God, should we have taken Fickell versus?
I mean, let's be honest. Anytime you hire a coach, it's a crapshoot, and most time you're going to lose, right? I mean, you're going to lose most times. Matt Rule right now appears to be a home run at Nebraska. Billy Napier.
Again. 3 games.
Billy Napier, who would have thought that Billy Napier right now is probably not going to make it through the season at Florida? I mean, you're just dealing with a completely different mindset where the patience, and you look at Lance Leipold, even though they're 1-2, he's getting a stadium built down there. He's got a long-term contract. The expectation level at KU is a lot different than it is at Nebraska, right? I mean,
it is.
He's fine down there. I think one of the interesting parts of yesterday's Illinois game, and it happened with Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa was penalized 9 times against Nebraska. I can't wait to talk to Coach Mark Farley about this, and he'll make sure he doesn't get fined. I thought some of the penalties were questionable.
Was it Big Ten officials?
I believe so.
Can he comment on that? I think he can.
That's a good question. I don't think so.
I say that because the Nebraska game, I believe, was Big 12 officials against Colorado.
It was.
I mean, the game was in Lincoln, but I think it was Big 12 officiating. I don't know the truth of it, and maybe Rule got slapped with a fine that we don't know about, but he had that comment where he said, hey, I think it's Big 12 officials, so they can't fine me. Yeah, I was disappointed in the officiating.
But Illinois was flagged 10 times yesterday for 81 yards. That's lack of discipline right there, right? I mean, that's lack. 10 penalties is a lot. You get anything above 6 or 7, and that's kind of a red flag.
And it depends on what the penalties are. Because I've seen, you see the ticky-tack stuff that happens on every play, that sometimes officials decide, hey, you know what, today we're calling that stuff. So it's that can be questionable. I mean, I've seen games where a team's been flagged 3+ times for targeting in a single game. Well, that's not necessarily discipline. That's a case where, you know what, a guy's going in to make a tackle, and in a split second, he moves his head down to avoid a targeting. At the same time, the wide receiver decides, hey, I don't want to get my bell rung. I'm going low at the same time. And, well, it ends up being a head-to-head hit, and it's nobody's fault, and the official is forced to throw the flag on it because that's the targeting rule, which is idiotic. But in general, you are probably correct that if you see 8+ penalties in a game on a given team, there probably is some discipline issues, especially if it's consistent. Now, you look at Nebraska under a little bit under Pelini, under Mike Riley, under Frost. you saw those discipline things. It was turnovers and penalties were the things that always haunted them. And so that's something where if you do see that, it is something that a coach needs to be worried about.
One of the things we talked about last week, and I love the YouTube comments, and Owen keeps me grounded because he's like, Dad, just don't comment.
Keep them coming, by the way.
Yeah,
we actually do read that.
Yeah, we read them. We don't comment because, well, I might say something I regret.
There are so many rabbit holes we can go down.
there are a lot of rabbit holes. But I was called like an ultimate Iowa homer, which I am, but because I made fun of the 1890 Nebraska on the field last week. And I called Memorial Stadium basically sacred ground, right? What was missing from the field yesterday, Rob?
The 1890 logo. And multiple people pointed that out. And I say that in the sense, it was obvious it wasn't there this week.
And somebody wrote, Trav, do you ever figure out that the football program started in 1890? Yeah, that's why the collective is called 1890. And the logo they had on the field was the 1890 Nebraska collective logo.
The collective logo.
So there is now a banner in the end zones. But I thought it was pretty interesting that they took it off. Now you can name a field now. You can do that in a corporate sense, but it has to meet some criteria. I wonder if the NCAA, and I haven't heard, and somebody may talk about this after the podcast comes out, but I wonder if somebody said, you can't put the collective on the field.
And that might have been the case. I truly don't know what the rules are regarding that. If that's not the case, my assumption would be within marketing, it's not like marketing is this black or white. We're going to do this or we're going to do that. We're going to try this. We're going to test a little reaction here from the consumer and see what the consumer thinks of this. You know what? We got a little bit of negative blowback on this. We're going to change it and do something different. Or, hey, you know what? The consumer absolutely loved it. Guess what? We're going all in on that. I am wondering if they got just enough consumer blowback that people didn't like it. Hey, we get it. You have to have the NIL dollars. Now, wherever those NIL dollars are coming from, whether it's private individuals, whether it's a corporation or a collective, you've got to have it. It's just how do you put that out there from a marketing standpoint?
Well, because the majority of fans can't afford to give money. And what I mean by that, you're spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to go to a game. If you're getting a hotel, you're paying for parking, you're paying for concessions.
It is not a cheap endeavor.
It's not. And if you're paying for tickets, you're tapped. You're going to keep asking me for more. This is the problem with the collective, is that you're going to keep asking money to give them money to go directly to the players. You got to compete, but there's an internal struggle with that, with a lot of people.
And I do understand that, but from a general booster standpoint, because I do think, the majority of those dollars are coming from people who were on some level a booster.
I would agree with you.
They're donating money to the program in some way, shape, or form. It's just now you're directing it to the players themselves. And I think that's a movement we've seen over the last couple of years. We talked to Troy Dannon about this. This was just me hanging out and talking with Trev Alberts, where Trev said that's a thing. And it's one of those situations where a lot of booster dollars in the past really were going towards facilities, fan amenities, things like that. You're getting a bigger, brighter, cleaner weight room. You're getting that new locker room. You're getting the sleep pods, the this, the that. The fans are going to get better seats, so on and so forth. Those dollars and kind of the chatter we've heard from athletic administrators nationwide has been, hey, the facilities arms race that we've been watching over the last, say, about 30 to 35 years in college football, they said that's going to be coming to an end.
Well,
and you're going to see all those dollars going towards the players now.
And we can say this now because the Tom Osborne complex is open, and they've got a really cool fly-through if you haven't seen that yet. Rob, myself, and Owen got to tour that when we interviewed Troy Dannon. I mean, it's spectacular. It's amazing. But you remember what I asked?
I was in awe. Here's the thing. When I went to school down there,
you had the best facilities.
That for that era, back in 1989, 1990, that was the palace of that time period. And I'm looking at it just now going, okay, I'm like completely blown away by this. I mean, it's almost surreal how nice that is. But like I said, I don't think you're going to see...
It's not going to have as big as impact as people think. Everybody's like, oh, that's going to get recruits. No, money gets recruits.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to... There is a baseline level of...
expectation.
Of palatial facilities you're going to need to have. But everything beyond that, you're right. It's what are they going to get from an NIL deal?
But do you remember what I asked Troy as we were on the tour? I said, if you would have been here and knowing what you know now, would you have built this? Remember what the answer was? It was no.
Yeah.
It was no.
Yeah.
Because they want those dollars going to...
Now, I will say this, as nice as that facility is.
And it's crazy.
As insanely impressive as that facility is. It was pretty nice what they had before.
Yeah.
It really was. So it's a step up. But what they had was a hell of a nice facility. The thing that I always think about, so the story I'm going to tell here, my rookie year with the New York Giants, we'd gotten done with meetings during a preseason training camp, and it was myself and Scott Gregg, who was a big offensive tackle out of Montana. We were the 2 O-line draft picks. We're walking underneath Giants Stadium from the offensive line meeting room back over to the locker room. And Scott made a comment to myself and the O-line coach about just, you know what, it's the NFL. I kind of thought stuff would be a little nicer because the meeting room was a cinder block room in the bowels of the stadium. Bunch of like your middle school chairs with just particle board desks. You had your beta player and you had your screen hanging from the wall. That's your O-line meeting room. I mean, the weight room, it was on par, I would say, with a fairly nice high school weight room for that era. Not now. So I've been to Omaha West Side's weight room. It's basically what we had when I was in college.
Which is pretty nice for a high school.
That's pretty damn nice. So, I mean, but your big high schools now, West Side, Bellevue West, Elkhorn South, they've got palaces for weight rooms.
Yeah.
It's the nature of it. The key point of the story is that when Scott commented about just like, hey, I kind of thought when you look at the meeting rooms, the locker room, the weight room, I kind of thought it'd be bigger. I kind of thought it might be a little nicer. The Giants offensive line coach at the time, he looks at us and goes, hey, you know all those facilities you guys had in college? Scott and I are like, yeah. He goes, all that money is going towards your salaries now.
And you went, okay.
Yeah, that made sense. And we're like, we get it. There you go. Totally makes sense. That is the dynamic that you now have in college football. All of those dollars are now going to go to the players. So all of those booster donations, all of that money, it's not going into the facilities arms race anymore. It's going into NIL.
Another thing that I noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I could be totally wrong. I think the Tree Huggers might have won out because I didn't see any balloons released on Saturday night.
I didn't either, but I was up in Brookings.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, where are the balloons? Where are the balloons?
Now, I will say, Gannon did say that was a one-time thing for the Colorado game. They might do it again at some point, but at least as of that time, it was a one-time thing that they were doing. They'd kind of play it by ear going forward from that.
So that's another thing. Let's see if it works. Let's see what the reaction is.
I think people really liked it. I actually don't think they got a ton of pushback on it.
Well, I mean, Channel 7 or Channel 6 went and found the old student who led the charge against it because everybody's like, helium's is not an infinite, resource. It's all going to disappear one day. Well, there was a shortage a couple years ago, and I don't think we have a helium shortage anymore.
Well, not right now. On the flip side, I'm not sure if it's even possible to manufacture helium.
You can't. It's a natural resource. I don't think you can manufacture.
All right, there you go.
But hell, we haven't gone to the moon yet either. You think we went to the moon?
You've been watching way too much Joe Rogan.
I have been. I got sucked in on a Joe Rogan podcast, and I'm convinced we didn't go to the moon. Just convinced of it. So there.
Killing me.
I know. My wife's looking at me like, oh, God, not you.
We're talking afterwards. I'm gonna bring Travis back into reality.
I'm telling you, the Van Allen radiation belt and Elon Musk saying he needs 9 refuels to get to the moon with his rockets.
What?
Yeah, that's what he said. Need 9 refuels. The Van Allen radiation belt's kind of the one thing that's hitting it up with me. But again, this is not a conspiracy theory podcast. We just didn't go to the moon. Anyway,
there's conspiracy theories I believe in.
That's not one of them, I take it.
That's not one of them. Was there a guy on the grassy knoll? Yeah.
So you're a Kennedy conspiracy theorist.
Oh, yeah, there's no way one guy shot him, especially when the bullet came from the other direction.
Yeah, remember watching that for the first time in high school, like, oh, that's a little graphic. They should have put like a warning on that.
Yeah.
Hey, there's a new number 1 team in the country because Georgia
13-12.
Yeah, but then Texas goes up. Did you see Arch Manning take off running yesterday? I mean, who knew a Manning could run? Because Peyton couldn't run, Eli couldn't run, and all of a sudden, Arch just takes off and looks like a world-class sprinter. And not to mention, he's a backup quarterback. He had 4 touchdown passes. He's a backup quarterback. Quinn Ewers is, Texas is really good.
The other thing is, and so this goes back to last year, the thing that really impressed me about Texas last year and continues to impress me now, they got a defense. And it's only going to get better. And that offense is only going to get better. And God, I hate Sarkisian. The guy drives me nuts. I don't know what it is about the guy. He just seems angry at the world.
Just the way he comes off?
I don't know. It's a little too intense.
And the truth is, if you got together with him, you'd probably love him.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys I've seen where it's like that. But I don't know.
I'm like that. Most people hate me.
Yeah, but that's with good reason. The public persona I don't like. It's as much as Nebraska fans, as much as we're supposed to hate Texas, he's got it going down there, and that's the program that I look between them and Oklahoma when they went to the SEC. I'm looking at going like, okay, you know what? I think Texas is going to be fine. I really do.
Yeah, they're stacked, and now the new number 1 team in the country. Alabama looked good. They blew out Wisconsin. Ooh, buddy.
Yeah, but I'm not sure I'm sold on Wisconsin, and I think they're still. God, I still think they're paying the price for not diving into the whole NIL portal thing a couple of years ago. They actually might have been more resistant to that than Iowa was.
Iowa wasn't resistant. Nobody wanted to step up and do it.
Well, and I think Iowa wanted to do it in I don't know. They wanted everything to be
even.
Nice.
They wanted to be Iowa nice.
They wanted it exactly. It's one of those no hierarchy, the star quarterback, because there's never one at
No, there's
Iowa.
not. There's still not. By the way, they got a good running back, though. Caleb Johnson is a hell of a running back.
But, I mean, it's one of those things. Iowa wants Caleb Johnson to get the same amount of money as the first-year starting offensive guard gets.
Shouldn't happen. Your stars get the money, right?
And that's kind of how it works. And if you're going to get kids to go to school there, if you're going to get really good football players to go to school there, if you're going to get Caden Proctor to transfer from Alabama and keep him there, you're going to have to do something, and they didn't do it.
So I haven't given you shit yet, but we're coming to a close. Florida State lost again, dude. Your Florida State Seminoles.
Brutal.
0-3. We've been talking about it behind the point spread. How long does Mike Norvell last?
So Florida State in the last, I think it's in the last 50 years, has had 3 0-3 starts. One under Bobby Bowden in his first year.
And 2 under Norvell?
2 under Norvell. I think Norvell, I still think he survives this. I could be wrong.
But he'll be at a very, very short lease come next year. Very short.
If it is, yeah. And it's the thing is, though, is that he's a guy who has not shied away from the portal, from NIL. You've got great facilities. I think he's a great recruiter. I think they banked on DJ at quarterback, and it was one of these things that
it's a crapshoot. He didn't start listen, Cade McNamara didn't start at Michigan after J.J. McCarthy, right, for a reason. He didn't start at Clemson for a reason. Do
you know what he is? He's an ever so slightly more athletic Jeff Sims. He's a turnover machine. He's either going yard and scoring a touchdown, or he's getting sacked and fumbled, or throwing a pick. And unfortunately, the sack, fumble, and the pick are 2 out of 3, and that's kind of a problem.
So if you want to know what Dr. Rob and Scott Spreitzer think about the Nebraska-Illinois game, make sure to tune in live 8 o'clock Wednesday night on YouTube, as we're going to be doing Behind the Point Spread with Scott Spreitzer. He's our Vegas insider. We're going to go in deep to the Nebraska-Illinois game from a betting perspective.
Going to be an interesting breakdown from Scott, because like I said, I'm looking at Illinois, and I'm not buying right now.
Another game we're going to be taking a look at is the USC-Michigan game. That's interesting, right? I mean, we know a little bit about Michigan, but we don't know a lot about USC.
Did you see the point spread shift?
I haven't.
So I think Michigan was, a 2-touchdown favorite in July. I think they're now, it's something like a 6.5-point dog.
Wow. Then this is a big game for Lincoln Riley and USC.
It is. But they've actually looked okay so far.
We also look at the National Football League. I think we're going to look at the Cowboys, who got blown out by the Saints this week, and Ravens. So 4 college football games, 1 NFL game. It's Behind the Point Spread Wednesday night live on YouTube at 8 o'clock Central. So hit the subscribe button to the YouTube channel, and you'll know right away when the latest content comes out. For Owen Justice, for Dr. Rob Zatechka, I'm Travis Justice. We will talk to you next week on the Doc Talk Podcast.